This picture was taken in 1961, and this young girl was found adrift on a small cork raft near the Bahamas, burnt, dehydrated, and on the brink of death. She can barely utter her name before collapsing. But what doctors uncover about her story is even more chilling than her miraculous rescue. Fast forward to today, and that same girl, now all grown up, is finally revealing the truth behind her incredible tale.
I huddled in this raft and it was very dark and I was motionless and silent, and I just stayed that way and stayed that way. It finally dawned on me that there was something evil about Captain 𝐉𝐻, and I was very fearful that he would find me.
Prepare to be captivated by the incredible story of the sea orphan, the body. In the landlocked state of Wisconsin, there lived a man named Arthur Duperrault. During World War II, he spent his days as a Navy man in the South Pacific and fell in love with the tropical waters. After his discharge, he returned home to Green Bay, where he became a successful optometrist. But Arthur couldn't shake the dream of taking his family on an island-hopping adventure in the Bahamas. Finally, in 1961, Arthur decided to make his dream a reality. He took an extended leave from his practice, pulled his kids out of school, and headed down to Florida with his lovely wife, Jean. They planned to buy a boat and sail around the southern waters for the entire fall. But after failing to find a suitable vessel, they decided to charter one instead. At the 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍 yacht basin in Fort Lauderdale, they stumbled upon a sleek and sexy 60-foot ketch called Bluebell. It was skippered by a dashing and handsome man named Julian 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍, who lived on board with his brand new bride, Mary Dean. The Duperrault family couldn't believe their luck. Things were about to take a wild and unexpected turn. However, the Duperrault family finally chartered the Bluebell, and on a beautiful Wednesday morning on November the 8th, 1961, the Duperrault family was ready to embark on a week-long adventure on their chartered yacht, Bluebell. They set sail from Fort Lauderdale with the wind in their hair and the sun on their skin, ready to explore the crystal-clear waters of the Bahamas. Days go by, and the family is having the time of their lives. They're island hopping, swimming with dolphins, and soaking up the warm sun. But little do they know that their dream vacation is about to take a dark and twisted turn. On Monday, November the 13th, a lookout on an oil tanker bound for Puerto Rico spots a small wooden lifeboat drifting aimlessly in the open sea. As they approach, they see a man, Julian 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍, looking surprisingly healthy and vigorous, sitting in the boat with the corpse of a little girl in an oversized life jacket. It's later revealed that the little girl was none other than the 7-year-old Renee Duperrault. Suddenly, the sun-drenched adventure turns into a full-blown mystery. What happened to the rest of the Duperrault family? How did Julian 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍 survive? And most importantly, what led to this horrifying event? We may never know all the answers, but one thing's for sure. The Duperrault family's island-hopping vacation turned into a tale that would go down in history as one of the most tragic and bizarre events.
I think I went into shock because I didn't go and touch them, and I think I knew they were dead.
At sea. After being rescued by the tanker, Julian 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍 spilled the beans on what happened to the Bluebell. According to 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍's story, the Bluebell was hit by a sudden tropical squall in the middle of the night. The wind was howling and the waves were crashing, and things were getting pretty intense. And then, snap, the main mast broke in two, plummeting down onto the deck and rupturing the fuel lines, which burst into flames faster than you could say abandoned ship. But Julian 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍 wasn't about to let his dreams of being a hero go up in smoke. No sir. He grabbed some extinguishers and went to battle with the raging inferno all by himself. Meanwhile, his wife and the other passengers huddled together at the stern of the yacht. Unfortunately, the ketch was going down faster than a lead balloon, and there was no time to waste. The others leaped into the water, hoping to find safety in the open sea. But 𝐉𝐻𝐈𝐍 had a plan. He launched the dinghy and dove overboard, hauling himself into the lifeboat like a boss. He shouted hoarsely, trying to find Mary Dean and the Duperraults in the darkness, but alas, no one answered. Eventually, he found little Renee floating face down in the water, her oversized life jacket keeping her afloat.
There was a red search plane that came so close to me I could almost reach up and grab it. I took my blouse off and I waved it, thinking, and I was screaming and thinking that, I'm here, don't you see me?
she was already gone. The others had vanished into the sea, lost forever. It looks like Julian 𝐉𝐍, the dashing skipper of the ill-fated Bluebell, has made a remarkable recovery after his rescue. Not only did he manage to survive the inferno that destroyed his vessel, but he also miraculously pulled himself together for an official Coast Guard investigation in Miami just 2 days later. Looking sharp in his brand new sports jacket and matching slacks, he was the picture of cool and collectedness. And why wouldn't he be? Despite losing his new bride and 5 passengers, including 3 children, in a tragic accident, he never wavered from his original story. Sure, there were some dubious details, like a lookout who saw nothing and broken masts that turned into deadly projectiles, but Julian handled every pointed question with ease. The investigators had no choice but to accept his version of events, since there were no other living witnesses to refute it. Well, that's what Julian 𝐉𝐍 believed, but was he the hero that he claimed to be? As the courtroom drama reached its climax, the air was thick with tension. All eyes were fixed on the witness stand as 𝐉𝐍 delivered his testimony with all the gravitas of a Shakespearean actor. Just as he finished speaking, a Coast Guard official burst in like a scene straight out of an action movie, announcing that a survivor had been rescued from the treacherous sea. 𝐉𝐍's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the floor. He was so shocked that he had to take a moment to compose himself. "Oh my God," he stammered, feeling like he was in the middle of a blockbuster thriller. But before anyone could say another word, 𝐉𝐍 shot up from his chair and bolted out of the room like Usain Bolt at the Olympics. Meanwhile, out at sea, a little girl was floating on a cork life raft like a real-life Robinson Crusoe. But she wasn't alone for long, as a Greek freighter called Captain Theo spotted her from afar. One of the crew members couldn't believe his eyes, so he snapped a photo of the unbelievable sight. That photo later made headlines in Life magazine, which devoted 10 whole pages to the incredible story of the death ship and its lone survivor. The ocean was as calm as a sleeping baby as the crew of the ship spotted something floating in the distance. As they drew closer, they saw a small white raft bobbing up and down in the water. As they hoisted it aboard, they could see a figure lying motionless on the deck, looking like a castaway from a deserted island. As they carried her into the cabin, they knew she had been through something terrible. She was as skinny as a beanpole, with dull eyes and sunburned skin that looked like a lobster on a bad day. The captain tried to ask her questions, but she could barely manage to speak. Her voice was like a croak from a frog, and she was dangerously dehydrated. Finally, she managed to rasp out a few words, revealing the name of her doomed vessel, Bluebell, and her name, Terry Jo Duperrault. The crew gasped in shock at the revelation that this fragile-looking girl had survived such a harrowing ordeal. The captain immediately sent a telegraph to the Coast Guard informing them of their miraculous rescue. The response was swift, with a helicopter flying to their location to whisk the sea waif away to Mercy Hospital in Miami. As she arrived at the hospital, a throng of newsmen awaited her arrival. She had dubbed her the Sea Waif, and her story had captivated the world. She may have been battered and bruised, but she was a true survivor, and her tale would never be forgotten. For a little girl who had been adrift at sea for 4 days without any food or water was rescued, barely clinging to life. But miraculously, she made a remarkable recovery in just 5 days, thanks to her tough spirit and unbreakable will. On November 20th, she was feeling so strong that she was ready to face the Coast Guard officials who wanted to interrogate her. They were amazed at her resilience and determination, but what they heard from her was shocking. Her story was completely different from what they had heard from Julian 𝐉𝐍, the captain of the ill-fated ship. According to Terry Jo, on the night of the tragedy, she had gone to bed around 9 o'clock, but in the middle of the night, she was jolted awake by a commotion that sounded like screaming and stamping. At first, she thought it was her brother calling out to their father for help, but when she emerged from her cabin, she saw a grisly sight that no child should ever have to witness. Her mother and brother lay motionless on the floor of the central cabin, surrounded by a pool of blood. The scene was straight out of a horror movie. Terrified and alone, Terry Jo made her way up to the main deck, where she saw even more blood near the cockpit, but there was no one in sight. The Coast Guard officials listened in stunned silence as Terry Jo recounted her harrowing experience. This little girl had survived against all odds, and her bravery was an inspiration to us all. Hold on to your hats, folks, because the plot thickens. Terry Jo Duperrault's story just got even more intense. After surviving for days on a tiny raft in the middle of the ocean, she had to face the wrath of the crazed Captain 𝐉𝐍. When she stumbled upon a gruesome scene of blood and carnage, 𝐉𝐍 didn't take kindly to her snooping around. He went ballistic and shoved her down the stairs, yelling at her to stay put. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, Terry Jo then had to contend with rising water levels in her cabin, which she suspected was due to 𝐉𝐍 cleaning up the blood on the deck. But when 𝐉𝐍 appeared again, rifle in hand, she knew things were about to get even worse. With a chilling glare He stared at her before disappearing back into the shadows. As the Bluebell began to sink, Terry Jo knew she had to act fast. She made a break for the cockpit where she asked Harvey if they were sinking. When he confirmed her worst fears, he selfishly jumped into the dinghy and left Terry Jo to fend for herself. But our heroine didn't give up hope just yet. She remembered a small cork raft on top of the cabin and managed to climb aboard it just as the Bluebell went down. And if that's not enough to make your heart race, get this. Terry Jo later testified that there was no fire and the sea was calm, directly contradicting Harvey's claims. What happened out there on the open water? The mystery deepens. Buckle up, folks, because this story just took a dark and twisted turn. After surviving 4 days adrift at sea, Terry Jo Duperrault shared her terrifying account of the Bluebell disaster, confirming what many already suspected. This wasn't just an unfortunate accident. Oh no, this was a mass murder by a berserk man, according to one Coast Guard official. And the perpetrator? Well, he was already 6 feet under by the time Terry Jo shared her story. Julian Harvey, the captain of the ill-fated Bluebell, learned of Terry Jo's rescue and decided to check into the Sandman Hotel under the name John Monroe. But instead of lying low and figuring out his next move, he wrote a suicide note and went on a self-destructive rampage. He cut his left thigh down to the bone with a double-edged razor blade, then proceeded to paint the bathroom walls with his blood, like some kind of macabre finger painting session. But apparently that wasn't enough, because he also slashed his ankles, wrists, forearms and throat. The police who found him initially thought someone had murdered him and made a clumsy attempt to make it look like a suicide. But no, it was just a disturbed man taking his own life in a truly gruesome fashion. So what could have driven Julian Harvey to such madness? That's still a mystery, but one thing's for sure, he went out in a blaze of horror that no one will soon forget. Well folks, it seems like the mystery of the Bluebell disaster has been solved, and let me tell you, it's one wild ride. Our friend Julian Harvey wasn't quite the upstanding citizen we all thought he was. He was hiding a dark and murderous side beneath his glamorous exterior. It all started with a $20,000 insurance policy on his wife Mary Dean's life. Suspicious much? And then there were those deep scratches on his arms. Sure, he claimed they were from wire cuts, but Harold Pegg wasn't fooled. He knew those were fingernail scratches. So the theory goes that Harvey set out to kill his wife but was caught in the act. And what do you do when you're caught red-handed? You go full on berserk and kill everyone. Makes perfect sense, right? But wait, there's more. After Terry Jo's miraculous rescue, Harvey checked into a hotel under the name John Monroe and wrote a suicide note. Now some people say it's because he couldn't live without his wife, but let's be real, it was probably because he knew he was about to be exposed to the murderous maniac he truly was. And to top it all off, he went into the bathroom and turned it into a horror movie set with all the self-inflicted mutilations. The police officers were so shocked by the scene that they thought it was a clumsy attempt to make it look like a murder. Nope, just good old Julian Harvey being his crazy self. In the last week of November 1961, our brave survivor Terry Jo was finally released from the hospital and flown back home to Green Bay. But did she get a hero's welcome? Oh no, not quite. Instead, her guardians went all in on the ignorance is bliss mantra and decided to keep her traumatic experience in the dark. They built an emotional wall so thick that even the Great Wall of China would be envious. Her friends, family and neighbors were given strict orders never to mention the Bluebell tragedy, while teachers were instructed to avoid the subject at all costs. That's like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound and hoping for the best. But alas, the human psyche is a complicated thing, and the pain and trauma of Terry Jo's experience were not so easily ignored. Years of emotional turmoil followed, and a string of martial crises proved that sweeping things under the rug never really worked out in the end. But don't you worry, our brave survivor was made of tough stuff. She had the same inner strength that allowed her to survive the ordeal in the first place, and with time, patience and the right support, she built a stable and fulfilling life for herself. Because sometimes the best way to heal is to face the problem head on, rather than pretend it doesn't exist. However, hold on to your life jackets, folks, because the incredible Terry Jo is a bombshell memoir that's still making waves across the minds of people. After decades of emotional turmoil and a series of martial crises, Terry Jo finally found the strength to tell her harrowing story in Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, co-authored by the brilliant psychologist Richard Logan. But that's not all, dear friends. In a twist that will have you gripping the edge of your seat, Terry Jo agreed to undergo a psychological interview while under the influence of a truth serum in 1999. And boy, did it unlock some long-suppressed memories. She recalled chilling details of that fateful night on the Bluebell, her brother's pajamas, the a bloody knife on the deck next to his body, but still couldn't piece together the events that led up to the massacre. Despite the frustration she has faced, Terry Jo's bravery and sharing her story is truly inspiring. Well, it's a tale of perseverance, resilience, and the unbreakable spirits of the human soul. Even though Terry Jo had to endure the most heart-wrenching circumstances, she never lost hope. It took her a while to recover from her trauma, but she finally found solace with her aunt and uncle, who loved her like their own child. Despite the lingering pain of losing her family, Terry Jo's connection with the sea never wavered. She followed her passion and worked with water regulation and zoning. Today, she is the proud champion of the ocean and is determined to make a difference. In life, we all face challenges, some more difficult than others, but Terry Jo's story reminds us that the human spirit is unbreakable. We can adapt to any circumstance, no matter how daunting it may seem. And with that, we can emerge stronger and more determined to positively impact the world. So let Terry Jo's story be a testament to the power of the human spirit and inspire us all to be the best versions of ourselves. And here's another juicy mystery for us to chew on. Along with trying to figure out why Harvey decided to go all murdery on his family and innocent passengers, there's another head scratcher that's been keeping folks up at night. And it was none other than the creator of Perry Mason, early Stanley Gardner, who first brought it up. He wanted to know how little Terry Jo Duperrault survived the ordeal. We mean, think about it. Harvey had the perfect opportunity to get rid of her and any evidence of his heinous crimes. So why did he spare her life? Was it a moment of mercy, a twinge of conscience, or was he just feeling lazy that day and didn't want to deal with one more body? It's a mystery for the ages, folks. So here's to Terry Jo Duperrault, the sea orphan, who showed us that even in the darkest of moments, there is always a glimmer of hope.